Hello, my name is Semyon Klitschkov and this is my presentation to my bachelor thesis on the topic interconnection of different types of databases in MontiGem. A number of technologies were used throughout this work. Hibernate is a framework for Java representing the object relational mapping and is also a GPA provider. This means exactly that it converts data between an object model representation to a relational data model representation. It also provides the Hibernate OGM engine, which is built for mapping to NoSQL databases. The databases we worked with are MySQL and PostgreSQL for relational and MongoDB for non-relational database. The MontiGem generator was provided through an example application with which a PostgreSQL database was used as the main data source. What we want to achieve is a simultaneous work with multiple different types of databases in a single project, which will be done by providing a new data source and adjusting the needed configurations in the project, thus achieving a parallel mapping and ease any further development. Once this is achieved, we want to test whether a relationship between entities from different databases is possible. And at the end, we also strive to study and apply the OGM engine in order to add a non-relational database to the project. The persistence concept lies in the basis for most of the work done later on. In Hibernate, the persistence specifications are done in the persistence XML, where the persistent units are defined. Each persistence unit corresponds to a respective database and contains all of the entities or Java data classes in order to be mapped to the respective database later on. The persistence units can create a persistence context at runtime which handles all of these specified entities. The entity manager then interacts with the persistence context, detecting all changes made to the entities and synchronizes them with the data store. An entity manager can be created from the entity manager factory, but this depends on the environment settings. At first, we created an example Java project in order to understand Hibernate and to see how the crucial components interact with each other. For this, two persistence units were made, one connected to the PostgreSQL data source and another connected to a newly created MySQL container. We then created two standard entity classes using the Java notations, and with two separate entity managers we managed to execute simple CRUD operations at runtime for both classes, thus mapping them to the respective database. With this we have proven that our first goal is achievable using Hibernate, which was not the case for realizing relationships between the entities. The next logical step was to apply the gained experience to the MontiGem application. Of course, MontiGem has a more complex structure and a number of factors had to be considered. A big part of the implementation is done with the MontiGem generator, and because the DAO pattern and the top method are used, all of the entity manager functions and CRUD operations are already established, leaving us with the main tasks to override them through a new persistence unit in order to navigate the wanted entities to the second data source. But in the end, we came to the conclusion that the existence of a second type of a database in MontiGem is not achievable, and to see why it is so, we will go over the main approaches we have applied. The first main approach was to generate through MontiGem a new entity class. Once this was done, we manage this entity by creating a new persistence context with the respective entity manager pointing to the MySQL database. At runtime, the result was that the new entity is not pushed to the second database, but rather in the initial PostgreSQL database. The logical next step is to abstract ourselves from the MontiGem generator and to create manually a new entity similar to the ones from the example project. And once this is created, we apply the same test as in the previous approach, but at runtime the result was also the same as before. At this point, a number of questions were raised as to why the new database is not acknowledged by the application, which changed our focus on the data sourcing in MontiGem. For this, the next main approach was to define a second router, and with this to initialize more precisely the new data source. After applying all the needed configurations and running the application, the approach was still ineffective, but we also experienced a number of issues caused from the changes made to some of the files. Further tests done to these directories proved that the second data source was not acknowledged due to the need of further changes to the MontiGem configurations that had to be done to repositories to which this example application did not give access to. Nonetheless, we also worked further with MongoDB and Hibernate OGM. The Hibernate OGM engine has a similar structure as Hibernate ORM, the Object Relational Mapping Engine, but with some differences, as for example the need of a data store provider and a transaction manager. Here we succeeded in integrating the OGM engine in the MontiGem application, thus at this point having the application running with both engines. Although the actual mapping of the entities to the MongoDB database was again impossible because of the same reasons as before. As a conclusion, most of the goals that we strived to achieve were partly not realized because of unexpected difficulties, but nonetheless we have still gained a lot of knowledge and experience which will facilitate any further work done on this topic. Thank you.